becomes extraordinarily important because he approached psychotic cognition not as meaningless irrationality, and that's important, right? We don't hear much of this term, psychotic cognition, as not as meaningless irrationality, but as a coherent symbolic organization operating according to different principles than ordinary rationality. In his kind of magnus opus, interpretation of schizophrenia, in those two books, Ariadne develops the concept of the Paleologic. Okay, it's a bit of repeating, but referring to primitive modes of thought organized through emotional equivalence and not Aristotelian differentiation. But so once one understands his concept of the Paleologic, contemporary culture suddenly becomes much easier to recognize psychoanalytically. And for example, because political disagreement increasingly becomes experienced as annihilation rather than conflict. We can think of cancellation, so-called cancel culture, where symbolic nuance collapses beneath affective intensity just to be rid of the foreign object. And identity increasingly forms through emotional resonance rather than reflective differentiation. Yet one of the central paradoxes of millennial psychosis is that the increasing prevalence of primary process cognition does not merely produce fragmentation and anxiety, but also the same weakening of symbolic rigidity destabilizes psychic organization and permits greater access to imaginative and associative life. The loosening of paternal structures opens the psyche to deeper contact with unconscious material, and I think this is one of the reasons creativity has become so psychologically central for younger generations, as well as bringing great anguish into assimilating into, for example, the confining brackets of work, which can feel like psychotic terror.